Oh, ho, 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 ho. What a juicy topic of a conversation we have to speak about today. Fisher and Paykel Healthcare. Yes. And when I speak about Fisher and Paykel, I'm not talking about Fisher and Paykel Appliances. I'm speaking of Fisher and Paykel Healthcare Corporation Limited. And basically, a lot of you may not know that Fisher and Paykel Healthcare is a completely different corporation to Fisher and Paykel Appliances. Both, of course, are New Zealand-based technology/appliance companies. But Fisher & Paykel Healthcare is a manufacturer, designer and marketer of products and systems for use of respiratory care, acute care and the treatment of obstructive sleep apnea. So basically, based in New Zealand, their products and systems are sold around to 120 countries worldwide. And Fisher & Paykel Healthcare is primarily an exporting company with just 1% of revenue coming from New Zealand sales. So it is an international manufacturing company, but of course they are based in New Zealand, and they're very, very important to the New Zealand economy because it's one of the few sort of tech exporters of technology in New Zealand, really. So basically, in today's episode, we're just going to be diving into just a little bit about the history of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare and what they mean for the New Zealand economy. What is the origin story of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare? How did they separate from Fisher & Paykel Appliances? What's the whole story behind that? Well, basically, we're going to be uncovering the humble beginnings of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. From Auckland to a world-leading medical technology company. We're just going to be looking into everything.
Hi, I'm Tom Dunkins, and this is the MarketTalk podcast, where we talk about, well, marketing, and some other things like branding, business, you name it. This podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Be sure to subscribe so you can keep up to date with the latest episodes.
I don't know what was going through your head a couple minutes ago. What were you thinking? Why did it take you so long to click on this episode here, whether you're watching on Spotify or YouTube or iHeartRadio? Why did it take so long? You should have instantly seen that thumbnail and just clicked on it like within 1 millisecond, because this is a very, very interesting, mind-boggling topic here, because I'm going to assume that most Kiwis out there, and I'm going to assume like 99% of the people watching this episode are New Zealanders, I'm going to assume that you have some sort of a Fisher & Paykel appliance in your household right now, because I certainly do. I've got a Fisher & Paykel dishwasher, a washing machine, and just, a lot of Fisher & Paykel appliances, and I've already gone over the whole Fisher & Paykel appliances sort of lore in one of my previous episodes, so if you haven't checked that out, check it out now. Basically, in that episode I just talked about sort of Kiwi-based companies that have moved to China over the years and started manufacturing in China. And I did briefly speak about Fisher & Paykel Appliances. But today we're just going to be looking into the history of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. And basically, Fisher & Paykel, the whole Fisher & Paykel Corporation, started in 1934 as an importer of refrigerators, washing machines, and radios. So basically, they actually started out as just a importer for appliances. But basically, in 1938, Fisher & Paykel signed an agreement with Kelvinator, and in the mid-1950s, it moved on to manufacturing products using the company's own technology. So in the mid-1950s, they stopped importing goods to New Zealand, and they just thought, oh, well, what the heck, why not, make our own technology, design and manufacture our own technology. So that's when they started making all this appliance sort of stuff in New Zealand. They started actually manufacturing it here. But at this point, Fisher & Paykel were mainly focusing on the New Zealand target market as opposed to internationally selling as they are now. But basically, if we fast forward to the late 1960s, this is when Fisher & Paykel's involvement with healthcare began. So in the late 1960s, Fisher & Paykel sought involvement in a business that could benefit from their growing manufacturing and electronic expertise. A prototype respiratory humidifier developed in New Zealand for use with patients being ventilated in hospital intensive care situations was taken to the production stage by Fisher & Paykel. Continuing product innovation to improve patient care and development of a worldwide distribution network are two core strengths. So mainly Fisher & Paykel Healthcare really just focus on respiratory and acute care, so that's things like respiratory humidifiers, and they also do like obstructive sleep apnea related things, so continuous positive airway pressure systems. So they have a very select few products that they're manufacturing, but they're doing very, very well. If we look at their revenue here, in 2020 they had a revenue of $1,263,000,000. So they're doing very, very well. But yeah, so basically, as I just said, in the late 1960s, that's when they first started to develop their first humidifier. And then in 1971, the production of their first respiratory humidifier officially began, and that is where that's when they sort of first started to sell their healthcare solutions. And during the 1980s and 1990s, that is when things really started to pick up. That is when they started to do like big contracts with hospitals all around the world, and they sold like so many, like thousands of these systems to hospitals all over the place. And so things really started to pick up there. And so basically that's really the whole story. They sort of just started out, importing all these appliances into New Zealand, and then they started to manufacture their own sort of appliances, and then they sort of evolved into this healthcare sort of manufacturing company, and then eventually they did split into two completely different corporations. So in the late 1990s, there was the decision to split the two separate companies. So now there is Fisher & Paykel Appliances, which is the consumer goods side of things, and then there is the Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, which is of course the medical technology corporation. So basically, these are just two completely different companies. I know they've got the same names, but Fisher & Paykel Appliances is actually owned by Higher Technologies these days, which is of course the Asian sort of appliances company. And then Fisher & Paykel is still just their own sort of company. They're not really owned by anyone else. So they're two completely different companies, really. It does get a little bit confusing, but it's all just about the origin story. They used to be the same, but now they're split up. But yeah, really the reason for the split is pretty self-explanatory, really. They just healthcare and appliances just have very, very different market needs. You can't really be marketing like respiratory health systems along with like dishwashers. Like, it just didn't work. So they just had to split up the companies to be two completely different things. There were also very different global expansion strategies because, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, obviously they're selling to like they're selling 99% of their products internationally, whereas Fisher & Paykel Appliances, target a lot more of the New Zealand sort of market, and they are, of course, an international company, but they're still very well known around New Zealand, because like I say, most New Zealanders do own at least one Fisher & Paykel Appliances because they are, of course, a Kiwi-based company, so you just want to be loyal to the Kiwi manufacturing industry, whereas Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, you don't really think about them too much, because the average New Zealand household doesn't really have a respiratory system or a acute sort of a obstructive sleep apnea system, so you don't really think about that kind of thing. Of course, in some New Zealand hospitals, there would be some Fisher & Paykel Healthcare systems, but really the average New Zealander doesn't really think about Fisher & Paykel Healthcare on a day-to-day basis like you would with Fisher & Paykel Appliances, because I think about those F&P appliances just so often, man. I'm always thinking about it, So that's really what it comes down to, just very, very different market needs. But basically, in terms of the official split, the initial public offering happened in 2001, so there were plans all throughout the late 1990s to split the two companies, but eventually in 2001, 14th of November 2001 to be exact, the company was separated and was also listed on the stock exchange. So as part of a reorganisation, Fisher & Paykel Industries Limited was renamed Fisher & Paykel Healthcare Corporation, and a new company, Fisher & Paykel Appliances Holdings Limited, was established to own Fisher & Paykel's appliances and finance business. So yeah, basically in 2001, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare did go public. They were publicly listed, and in connection with the reorganisation, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare Corporation Limited was listed on the Australian and New Zealand stock exchanges and NASDAQ. And in February 2003, the NASDAQ listing was terminated, but they are still on the New Zealand stock exchanges and the Australian stock exchange. But yeah, in terms of where Fisher & Paykel Healthcare produce or manufacture their products, they are very, very different to Fisher & Paykel
Appliances.
Healthcare in a good way, because as I mentioned in the previous video where I talked about Fisher & Paykel Appliances, of course, they do manufacture their products in China. So they did initially, of course, manufacture their appliances in New Zealand, but they later moved to China because of course, like cheaper production costs and cheaper wages and all that. But good old Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, they are still manufacturing in New Zealand, so that's very, very good. They're contributing a lot to our economy here in New Zealand. So they basically manufacture, assemble, and test their complete range of products, including many components, at their facilities in New Zealand, with a total area of approximately 560,000 square foot. So that is a lot of square footage there in terms of manufacturing and factory building, I suppose. However, an additional manufacturing facility was established in Taijanua, Mexico, in 2010. However, the Taijanua, however you say that, facility was responsible for approximately 30% of the total production volume and approximately 50% of all products sold in the US in 2015. So yes, they do have a factory in Mexico, but that's only like 30%. So we still do manufacture like 70% of our healthcare products here in New Zealand, so that is still something. But you know, they just had to get that cheaper production cost. They just had to do it, you know. But anyway, 50% of the products are sold in the US, which are manufactured in Mexico in terms of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. So that's not the best, but anyway. Well, you just got to do what you got to do, you know. You just got to think in the minds of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. If I was the CEO of that company, you know what, I'll probably be doing the same thing, to be honest. So just got to do what you got to do to make the most profit, really. And the bad news continues. A second Taijanua manufacturing facility was completed in January 2019, and a third manufacturing facility in Mexico was planned in 2020, but as far as I know, I don't think they actually finished that. Okay, so I'm just doing some research, and they did plan to build this new facility in Mexico in 2020, but not much has happened yet. It may still go ahead, but there's not a lot of information on it. But we'll just see, guys. Hopefully they just, you know, keep manufacturing in New Zealand, because we just need that. We need that money, you know. We need to be exporting as much as possible, you know. So it would really not be ideal if they kept moving and building all these new factories in Mexico, because that's really not doing a lot of good for us. So that's really the history of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. In terms of what products they make, the company really maintains focus on two major product groups. So they've really just got their respiratory and acute care, and then they've got their obstructive sleep apnea. And, you know, I know nothing about healthcare, so I don't really know anything about these sorts of systems, but they've got these respiratory humidifiers. They also do like single-use and reusable chambers and breathing circuits and accessories. These are designed to humidify and deliver the gases that a patient receives during mechanical ventilation, non-invasive ventilation, oxygen therapy, and laparoscopic surgery. So there you go. So that's just their whole respiratory and acute care division there. In terms of their obstructive sleep apnea, they do continuous positive airway pressure therapy products, which are used in the treatment of obstructive sleep apnea to prevent temporary airway closure during sleep. So yeah, that's basically everything I had to say about Fisher and Paykel Healthcare, really. In terms of their revenue, they are doing very, very well. But I'm just looking at their NZX sort of history here in terms of the stock market, and even that's doing very well. Over the past 2 years, they've risen quite a lot. And in fact, just this year, on the 28th of May 2025, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare revenue cracked $2 billion. So they officially reached $2 billion this year because, of course, back in 2020 it was $1,263,000,000. So just over the span of 5 years, they've basically risen like almost almost about $700 million. That is pretty crazy right there. And their profit is in fact rising very, very steeply actually, because their net profit after tax just for the past year was $377.2 million compared to a year ago, which was only $132.6 million. So their profits are rising very, very steeply, which is, of course, a good thing. Obviously, because of the whole COVID thing and all that, all these healthcare concerns going on, they're doing very, very well. Obviously, ever since COVID, things have just been very, very good for Fisher and Paykel Healthcare. Their revenue for the past year was $2 billion versus $1.74 billion for a year ago. So honestly, I could just go on and on about these stats, but I don't really want to bore you. But basically, the moral of the story is they're doing very, very well. They're doing a lot of good for the New Zealand economy. And they are, no surprise, one of New Zealand's largest listed companies on the NZX 50. And they are, of course, a very, very big investment to the research and development sector in New Zealand. They provide a lot of high-value tech sector jobs in the country. They employ thousands of staff globally with a large share in the Auckland headquarters and manufacturing. And they just contribute a lot to New Zealand's GDP and trade balance. And honestly, I could just go on and on, but I think you kind of get the picture. They're just very important. Not as important as like Fonterra, for example, nowhere near as important as that, but they do still do a lot of good for the New Zealand economy, and it is also just a very good little reminder that, for little old New Zealand, we don't just have to focus on farming and like forestry and that kind of thing. Like, we do have the ability to manufacture these types of technologies and healthcare appliances, really. So, it's just a good little success story from a little startup from two people named Fisher and Paykel from 1934 that, started out just importing refrigerators, and now they're just a worldwide manufacturing company. It's just a very good little story about, two Kiwi blokes from the 1930s, And I just feel like New Zealand needs more companies like this. We just need more innovation in this country in terms of technology, because if we want to continue as a country and if we want to keep growing our economy, we need to do more than just farming. That's what it comes down to. We just need to manufacture more technology because that's where the world is headed, We just need to leverage all this AI stuff and all this, robotic sort of stuff here and just do as much as we can if we want to stay competitive. So that's really what it comes down to. So I'm just very grateful that Fisher and Paykel Healthcare have mainly remained in New Zealand in terms of their manufacturing and their product sort of designing. So that's basically all I had to say for today. I know this was a bit of a shorter episode, but that is what I'm aiming for. So just let me know what you thought of this episode and the whole Fisher and Paykel Healthcare situation down in the comments down below. And without further ado, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next episode of Market Talk. Peace out.
Market Talk is a production of TeamTMS. For more episodes of Market Talk just like this one, visit us on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.